Hello and welcome back to our channel. So today we are discussing a very important topic, that is Puritanism and American literature. So without wasting any time, let us get started. So before we discuss Puritanism and American literature, let us see what is Puritanism. So Puritans were a group of very religious people who lived in England hundreds of years ago. They wanted to make the Church of England stricter and more focused on the God. They had some special beliefs that made them different from other Christians at the time. So, what were the Puritans' key beliefs or their key concepts? So, Puritans believed that God was all powerful and had a master plan for everyone. Before you were even born, God already decided if you would go to heaven or not, and there was nothing you could do to change the God's plan. So the Puritans also believed that everyone was born with a sinful nature. It meant no matter how hard you tried, you would always mess up sometimes, and there was no way to earn your way into the heaven. So they also believed that God was involved in everything that happened, big or small. If a bird fell out of a tree, or you got rich, they thought it was part of God's plan and God was controlling everything. So Puritans liked things plain and simple. They dressed in a simple clothes and avoided fancy decorations and wrote in a way that was clear and easy to understand. And perhaps the most important thing for Puritans was the Bible. They believed that the only place to find true rules about how to live and how to have a good life and to please God, it laid only with the Bible. So let us now go on with the next point, that is Puritans in America. So Puritans were not quite happy with how things were going on in England. They felt that church wasn't strict enough and they wanted to live in a way that was closely followed by their beliefs. So they picked their bags and set sail for America, looking for a place where they could be in charge and practice their religion freely. So the Puritans landed in a part of America called New England. They started towns and colonies based on their religious rules. Their strong belief about the God and the Bible influenced everything. The laws they made, the way they ran their government, and even how they built their houses and dressed. Even though Puritan even though Puritan times were long ago, their ideas still left a mark on America. They were big on things like hard work, education, and strong communities. These values helped shape the way Americans think about themselves and their country even today. So now let us look at some of the key influence of Puritanism on American literature. So, for Puritans, writing wasn't just about creativity, it was a way to honor the God. They wrote poems praising his greatness, stories exploring his plan or the world, and guides to help the people who understand the Bible better. So, Puritans were big on examining their own hearts and minds. Diaries were like personal conversations with the God, while sermons taught others about their faith. Writing was a tool to analyze if they were living good, godly lives. So, Puritans believed in a world filled with temptations and dangers. Their stories and poems often acted as as a how to guide as a guide for good behavior. They wrote about characters who faced tough choices between right and wrong, hoping to inspire readers to choose good just like their heroes did. Let us now look at some of the styles and forms of Puritan literature. So, Puritans valued plainness and humility, and that showed in their writing. They avoided fancy language or complicated words. Their goal was to make their message as clear and as easy to understand as possible. Think of it like writing instructions for a really important task. You want to get the point across, not to impress anyone with your vocabulary. So the writing was like that. It was to the point and very clear. Diaries and journals were like soul searching sessions for Puritans. They wrote about their struggles with sin, their hopes for salvation, and the signs they saw of God's work in their lives. These writings were intensely personal and reflective. So, sermons were incredibly important to Puritans. Skillful preachers used vivid language and powerful stories to teach religious lessons and inspire their listeners to live better lives. These sermons were not just spoken but also written down and circulated to reach even more people. So, lastly, Puritans also used poetry to express their deepest religious beliefs or record important events in their communities. Unlike the flowery poems about love and nature popular in other times, Puritan poetry focused on God, the soul, and the lessons of history. Let us now discuss some of the important themes in Puritan literature. So, the Puritans believed that everyone was born with a sinful nature, always at risk of making mistakes. Their writing often reflected on the guilt and consequences of sin, as well as the hope of redemption, forgiveness, through God's mercy. So, since Puritans believed God controlled everything, they were fascinated with finding signs of His work in the world around them. Their writing explored how ordinary events, from a good harvest to a sudden illness, might be part of God's bigger plans. And for Puritans, the world was a constant battle between good and the evil. Their stories and poems often featured characters facing moral dilemmas, tempted by sin, and struggling to do the right thing. Think of think of it like a superhero story, but instead of supervillains, their enemies were like greed and pride. So Puritan communities were very close knit. Everyone relied on each other for survival and spiritual guidance. Their writing emphasized the importance of helping your neighbors, following community rules, and putting the group's well-being ahead of your own desires. So, lastly, now let us briefly discuss some of the important poets or some of the important writers of the Puritan literature. So let us look at Anne Bradstreet. So Bradstreet was one of the very first poets to be published in American colonies. While her poems followed Puritan beliefs, they also offered a glimpse into her everyday life as a woman, a wife, and a mother. She wrote about her love for her husband, the pain of losing loved ones, and her struggles with faith. So after Bradstreet, we have Jonathan Edwards. So, Edwards was a powerful preacher whose sermons often focused on terrors of hell and the urgent need for sinners to turn to God. His most famous sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, painted vivid pictures of the punishments awaiting those who didn't seek God's forgiveness. And lastly, we have Cotton Mather. So Mather was a true Renaissance man of Puritan times. He was a preacher but also a historian, scientist, and writer on many topics. His writings give us a valuable look into Puritan society, beliefs, and even their interest in the world around them. So this was all that we have for today's video. I hope you have got at least some knowledge or some information from this video. If you did so, please consider liking and subscribing to this channel. Thank you very much.